So I read this quote recently that went something along the lines of breadcrumbs will feel like a feast for someone who has been starved. And this one quote, hit so hard for me because I have always swayed towards a anxious attachment style. Like, I always have to hold myself back from falling too deep in love with things or people or activities or anything. I always have to hold myself back from falling too deeply. And recently I've completely switched around and I'm now extremely avoidant. I have trouble getting myself to love anything. Baby. I love this thing. 100%. I notice that it's hard to get myself to love anything or to even express that I'm excited about anything or to allow anything vulnerable to happen to me. Whether this is a person, whether this is an activity, whether this is the way that I live my life, anything. It's very difficult for me to be vulnerable. It's very difficult for me to love, and it's very difficult for me to allow myself to be loved. This is not the way I always was. Because I think for a lot of my life, I just wasn't given a lot of love. I was the one that gave of myself my entire life. And I think at a certain point, it just ran out. It's like I was so starved for love that I thought that these breadcrumbs that people were giving me, these tiny little niceties, were everything. But it's really hard when you are pouring everything you are into something and you're only getting breadcrumbs back. And my whole life, all I've ever received is breadcrumbs. And I thought that you were always just supposed to feel unloved. You're supposed to feel hungry. I was like, I have gave and I have gave and I have gave of myself. My cup is empty. I'm done. And it was at that moment that I was so done of loving everything that I just decided I was unlovable. That I decided that nothing good will ever come into my life again. It was like God or the universe or Steve or whoever the fuck is up there decided to just pour love into my life. They're like, oh, you think you're unlovable? You think that you can't be loved? Here, have so much love. And I have a feast laid out in front of me. And I'm so overwhelmed by that. Because obviously, if you've been given breadcrumbs your entire life, when you sit down to a table of food, to an actual fresh hot meal, not only is the amount of food that you're given, the amount of love you're given overwhelming to the point that you don't even want to eat it because you're like, this is so unfamiliar. But also when you're finally given the love that you deserve, you realize that you've been starved your whole life by people that you loved like a feast. And that moment of finally being loved in the way that you have loved your whole life, and finally sitting down and getting to vanquish the hunger that your heart has always had, is one of the most painful things I've ever gone through. And you would be so confused as to why is receiving the love you've wanted your entire life one of the most painful experiences you've ever gone through, Bailey? Well, it's because it finally made me realize that everything I've ever loved before that point didn't love me back. They were just giving me breadcrumbs. And so I have to tell myself constantly, Bailey, don't run from this love. These new things that you found that you enjoy, these new people that you're around every day, these new relationships that you're forming, these new paths that you're carving for yourself. Of course, it's overwhelming. Of course it's confusing. Of course you want to run. Of course it's uncomfortable to finally feel full when you felt empty your entire life. Receiving everything you've ever wanted is to finally feel the absence of the desire of it. And it's like I can finally catch my breath, but it's so painful because it makes me finally recognize how much I settled for things that didn't treat me the way I deserved.